A warning to our viewers. What you are about to watch is a true story. The following contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. A young woman stood at the edge of the loop, a narrow trail carved into the mountain above a ravine that drops 300 feet into solid rock. She had brought the search party here herself. She told the park ranger it was a place her husband had always wanted to see. The group moved carefully to the edge and looked down. At the bottom, partly hidden in the rocks below the cliff face, was a body. There was nothing unusual about the way she reacted. She had seemed to know exactly where to look, because she did. The woman who led that search party, the woman who told the ranger this cliff had been her husband's dying wish, had been standing at this exact spot 4 days earlier. She had not been looking for him then. She had been walking away from him. Cody Lee Johnson was 25 years old. He had been married for 8 days. On the morning of July 7th, the day he died, he turned down a kayaking trip with his friends because his new wife had told him she had a surprise for him. He never came home. Host here. Welcome back to When They Killed. Tonight, we are looking at the case of Cody Lee Johnson, a 25-year-old man from Kalispell, Montana, whose new wife spent 8 days of marriage, 3 days of a missing persons investigation, and one federal trial finding new ways to explain away the fact that she had pushed him off a cliff. Take a moment to subscribe to When They Killed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming. And now, let's begin. To understand what was lost on July 7th, 2013, you need to understand who Cody Lee Johnson was, not as a victim, but as a person. Cody was born in 1988 and grew up in and around Kalispell, Montana. Kalispell sits at the edge of Glacier National Park, a place of staggering physical beauty and the kind of quietness that either roots you or pushes you out. For Cody, it rooted him. He did not need to go anywhere to feel like he was somewhere. He worked at Nomad Global Communications in Columbia Falls, a short drive from home. He was reliable, consistent, and the kind of employee whose coworkers noticed almost immediately when he did not show up. That would matter later. What his friends remembered most about Cody was not a quality, it was a habit. He drove. On weekends, when out-of-state friends came to visit, Cody would take them up into the mountains along the Going to the Sun Road through Glacier Park, driving the kind of curves that required full attention and gave him full satisfaction. He was not reckless. He just loved the mountain roads. He loved the specific, earned feeling of a long drive through landscape that does not apologize for itself. His friends loved him for it. They loved him generally, without much complication. He was the kind of person you knew immediately, the kind whose number you saved after one conversation. And Cody's close friend Brad Blasdell would later describe him simply infatuated, not with life in general, with one particular person, and that infatuation had a name. He had found Linn Graham through her church, Faith Baptist Church in Kalispell. A mutual friend had described her as a good church girl, the specific kind of woman Cody had said he was looking for. He walked into her world and did not look back. He joined the church. He made friends with everyone in her circle. He was, by every account, completely and absolutely smitten. By the end of 2012, less than a year after they met, Cody had proposed. Jordan announced the engagement on Instagram in December with a photograph of the ring. The caption read, "He proposed. Best early Christmas present ever." The wedding was planned with care. The couple hired a professional songwriter, Elizabeth Shea, to compose a custom piece of music for the ceremony. Shay would later tell CNN that Jordan had been excited when she talked about the wedding. The wedding itself, not the marriage. That distinction would become important. Cody's mother, Sherry Johnson, would testify at her son's sentencing about the life she had imagined for him. "I always wanted to be a grandma," she told the court, and he was excited about that too. She said it in the past tense. Cody's friends had a slightly different read on the relationship, one they kept largely to themselves while Cody was alive. Brad Blasdell would testify that Cody's investment in Jordan had always seemed, in his words, one-sided. Another friend, Cameron Fredrickson, was more direct. He told ABC News that from the moment Cody mentioned the proposal, he had not been supportive. He did not think Jordan was right for him. He had a feeling about it. He could not have told you then exactly why. But even Cameron Fredrickson was not prepared for what happened in July. The wedding took place in the summer of 2013. By all external accounts, it was everything Jordan had hoped the wedding would be. Custom music, a church full of people who cared about both of them, photographs. What happened in the days that followed, inside the marriage itself, behind closed doors, in the text messages Jordan sent to a church friend named Kimberly Martinez, was something else entirely. And on the morning of July 7th, 8 days after the ceremony, Jordan Graham sent a message to a friend that no one would fully understand until much later. "But dead serious," she wrote. "If you don't hear from me at all again tonight, something happened." At the time, the friend did not know what to do with those words. Neither did anyone else. They would. To understand what happened to Cody Johnson, you need to understand something about the world in which this relationship existed. Kalispell, Montana is a small city, population around 20,000, pressed against the edge of Glacier National Park in the northwest corner of the state. It is spectacularly beautiful and deeply community-bound. People there know each other. Churches are not just places of worship. They are social architecture. They organize friendships, introduce couples, define reputations. Jordan Graham had grown up inside that architecture. Faith Baptist Church was not just her Sunday morning. It was her social world, her friendship network, the place she was known and recognized and had a role. She was 21 years old when she met Cody. She had lived with her parents until the night of her wedding. She had, by all accounts, limited experience of adult life outside the church community's framework. Trial witnesses would describe her as naive, immature, socially inept, shy, quiet, and unable to relate well to adults. These were not hostile characterizations. They came from people who knew her and were trying, in their way, to explain how someone could find herself 8 days into a marriage she did not want and see no way through it except the one she chose. Cody, meanwhile, and had built his entire understanding of Jordan inside the same framework: the church, the community, the carefully maintained public face of a devout young woman with strong values and a warm personality. He had seen everything Jordan chose to show him. He had not seen what she was writing to Kimberly Martinez in private. The speed of their relationship is worth noting. They met, became engaged, and were married in under 2 years. Cody drove that pace. Jordan, by her own later account, did not know how to stop it. She had told friends she had second thoughts. She had felt, she would say, unable to talk to Cody directly about her doubts. She did not want to hurt him. What she did instead was wait. She waited through the engagement. And instead of a conversation, she drove her husband to the edge of a cliff in a national park. Jordan Graham thought she understood what happened on the evening of July 7th. What she had not accounted for, what she would spend the next several months learning, was that she had made a specific and fatal error. She did not know about it yet, but it was already there. Jordan Linn Graham was born in August 1991 in Kalispell, Montana. She grew up in the same town, in the same church community, in the same social architecture that would later frame her marriage. She was, by the accounts of people who knew her, deeply religious, not performatively so, genuinely, structurally so. Faith Baptist Church organized her weeks, shaped her friendships, gave her a framework for understanding who she was and how the world worked. As she was there every Sunday, she was involved in special events, youth activities, the social fabric of a community that took its beliefs seriously. She was also, by every account, profoundly young for her age. Not in years. She was 21, 22 during the period of the relationship and the crime. But in experience, she had lived with her parents until the night of her wedding. She had not held a job, managed a household, or navigated the kinds of ordinary adult conflicts that most people her age had already worked through. She had not, to any documented degree, been in a serious relationship before Cody. People who knew her used words like shy and quiet, words like unable to relate well to adults, words that suggest not malice, but a kind of social underdevelopment, a person who had grown up inside one very specific world and had never been tested against anything outside it. What the church community saw was the good church girl. That was real. Jordan was genuinely devout, genuinely community-minded, genuinely the person Cody's friend had described when he suggested Cody pursue her. That version of Jordan Graham existed. It was not a performance, but behind it, or beside it, or underneath it, was a person who had found herself in a situation she did not want, could not articulate, and did not know how to exit. The text messages Jordan sent to Kimberly Martinez in the days after her wedding were not the messages of a calculating predator. They were the messages of someone panicking, someone who had made a promise she did not know how to keep and could not figure out how to unmake. In that panic, she did not reach out for help. She did not speak to a counselor, a pastor, a family member, a lawyer. She did not tell Cody what she was feeling. She wrote coded messages to a friend, moved through the days of her new marriage in a state of private despair, and arrived at July 7th with a decision she had not, apparently, fully articulated to herself. The prosecution would later argue that the decision was premeditated, that the text message sent that morning, the lure of the surprise, the choice of location, the retention of the car keys, all pointed to planning. The defense would argue that it was a moment of rage, an argument, a grab, a push, and a horror that followed. The truth of what Jordan Graham knew, I intended, and felt on the evening of July 7th is known with certainty only to one person. The federal judge who sentenced her would say so, plainly, on the day of sentencing. And Jordan's own friends, the people who had sat with her at church, who had known her for years, would find themselves unable to answer the question the whole case raised. One of them, Cameron Fredrickson, had known Cody since long before Jordan. When Cody went missing, Fredrickson did not wait for official news. He broke into their house. He told investigators he was looking for bloody rags, weapons, a body. He did not find any of those things, but he found exactly what he already suspected he would find. Nothing that disproved what his gut had been telling him since the moment he heard Cody was gone. Cody Johnson pursued Jordan Graham with a completeness that, in retrospect, is difficult to read without grief. He joined her church. He befriended her circle. He made himself part of her world before she had fully decided whether she wanted him in it. When he proposed at the end of 2012, he was acting on a certainty about Jordan that Jordan had never, to any documented degree, reciprocated at the same depth. This is the relationship's central structural fact. Cody was all in. Jordan was not. His friend Brad Blasdell testified to it plainly. Cody was infatuated with Jordan. It seemed one-sided. Cameron Fredrickson testified that he had never thought the marriage would work. He had told Cody so, or tried to. Cody had not heard it. Jordan, for her part, had said yes to the engagement, had planned the wedding, had hired the songwriter, had walked down the aisle. Whatever doubts were forming in her, and the text messages to Kimberly Martinez document clearly that they were forming rapidly in the days after the ceremony, she had not found a way to voice them to the one person most directly affected. What Cody Johnson did not know, as he drove his friends up mountain roads and talked about his future and made plans for a family he intended to build, was that his wife was writing to a friend describing her despair, that she felt trapped, that the intimacy of the marriage was something she had not been prepared for and did not want, that the image of Jordan Graham, the good church girl, the devout young woman, the bride who had hired a songwriter for her ceremony, was not fully continuous with the person who was sitting with these feelings in the days after the wedding. What he did not know was that she had been having these thoughts not just after the wedding, but before it. The text message conversations with Kimberly Martinez that prosecutors would later present as evidence began before the ceremony and darkened after it. What he did not know was that on the morning of July 7th, Jordan had sent a message to a friend containing the phrase, "If you don't hear from me tonight, something happened." And what he absolutely did not know, when Jordan told him she had a surprise and asked him to come with her that evening, was that she had already decided something about what the evening would contain. Whether that decision was premeditated murder, a confrontation that escalated beyond what she intended, or, as she would later claim, a moment of panic and rage that she did not fully control, is the question this case has never fully answered to the satisfaction of the judge who heard it. Investigators had been piecing together the text messages, and they had found something in those messages that no one had expected. There were dozens of them. Dozens of text messages between Jordan Graham and Kimberly Martinez sent over the weeks before and after the wedding. At first glance, they seemed to tell the story of a nervous young bride. At second glance, they told a different story entirely. But Cody Johnson did not know any of it. While Cody was telling friends he had found the woman he was going to spend his life with, Jordan Graham was writing to Kimberly Martinez about her doubts. Not vague doubts, not the ordinary nerves that accompany any major life change. Specific, escalating, documented doubts about the marriage, about the intimacy, about whether she had done something she could not undo. Prosecutors would present these text messages at trial. What they showed was a timeline. Jordan's excitement before the wedding, real excitement, consistent with what Elizabeth Shea had described when she talked about composing the ceremony music, followed by a rapid descent into something else entirely. In the days after the wedding, Jordan wrote to Kimberly about feeling trapped, about the physical expectations of marriage, about not being ready for what marriage actually required. She did not want to be intimate with Cody, and she was not prepared for the reality of sharing a home, a bed, a life with someone she had never been fully certain about. She had not told Cody any of this. He was, by every account, still fully, completely devoted to her. Still the same man who had joined her church, befriended her circle, proposed after less than a year. He would have given her, as one of her own friends later said, anything at the drop of a hat. Jordan's friend Latani Blasdell, who said she could not believe Jordan was capable of hurting anyone, made exactly this point. He would have worshipped her, she said. He would have given her anything. And yet Jordan Graham, sitting with a husband who loved her completely in a marriage that had lasted 8 days, found no way to use any of those words. The text messages established something else. A Jordan had not made a decision on the morning of July 7th, driven by sudden impulse. The messages documented a build, days of building, toward a confrontation that Jordan had been planning, at some level, since before that morning. She had told Kimberly Martinez she wanted to talk to Cody about her issues with the marriage. The message from July 7th, "If you don't hear from me tonight, something happened," was sent, prosecutors argued, by a woman who had already decided what the conversation was going to be, who had already chosen the location, who already knew what she intended to do if the conversation went the way she feared it would. The defense would dispute this reading. They would argue that Jordan was frightened of Cody's reaction to her doubts, not planning his death, that the message was anxiety, not premeditation, and that a young woman who felt trapped was not the same as a young woman who had planned a murder. The jury never got to weigh these arguments. Jordan Graham pleaded guilty before it reached them. But there was one piece of evidence, a physical piece, a specific and verifiable detail that sat inside the cover-up section of the case and pointed stubbornly towards something more calculated than a moment of rage. When investigators later reconstructed exactly what had happened after Cody fell, after Jordan had walked back up the slope and driven away from the loop without calling emergency services, without checking whether her husband was still alive, they found something that caught their attention. The car. The car that Cody had driven to Glacier National Park that evening. Jordan Graham had driven it home. She had the keys. The only set of keys to that vehicle had not ended up at the bottom of the ravine with Cody Johnson. They had ended up in Jordan Graham's pocket because she had put them there. The morning of July 7th, 2013 was a Sunday. Cody Johnson's stepfather-in-law, Stephen Rutledge, Jordan's stepfather, spoke with Cody that morning about going kayaking. There was a group going out. The weather was good. It was the kind of day in Montana that reminds you why you live in Montana. Cody said he couldn't make it. Jordan had told him she had a surprise for him. He would not miss a kayaking trip for nothing. He was looking forward to whatever it was. He seemed, by Rutledge's account, happy. Still the same Cody. Warm, easy, fully present in his own life. He had no idea what was waiting for him that evening at the edge of a cliff above the ravine on the loop trail in Glacier National Park. He had no idea that his wife had sent a message to a friend that morning about what might happen. He had no idea that the surprise was not what he thought it was. The kayak trip went ahead without him. His friends paddled out into the water. They came back. Cody Johnson did not. Sometime in the late afternoon or early evening of July 7th, 2013, Jordan Graham and Cody Johnson arrive at Glacier National Park together. A security camera at the park entrance captures them. Both of them, together. This image exists. At the time, neither of them knows it matters. It will. They drive to the Loop, a well-known pull-off on the Going to the Sun Road, one of the most scenic stretches of road in the United States. Below the Loop, a ravine drops away from the road by several hundred feet. The cliff face is sheer. The rocks at the bottom are solid. Park rangers use the word treacherous to describe this specific area. Jordan and Cody climb over a retaining wall that lines the road. They make their way down a rocky, steep slope to a narrow ledge below, hundreds of feet above the ravine floor. This is where the argument happens. Jordan has told Cody she wants to talk about the marriage, about her doubts, about what she has been feeling in the 8 days since their wedding. Cody's response is not known. He is 25 years old and completely devoted to his wife. He is standing on a narrow ledge above a 300-foot drop in a national park, he being told by the woman he loves that she has reservations about their life together. At some point during the argument, according to Jordan's own account, Cody grabs her arm. Jordan pushes him, not once, with both hands, in the back. Cody Johnson falls face first from the ledge. He falls 300 feet. Jordan Graham does not go to the edge. She does not call out. She does not look over to see whether he has survived. She does not call emergency services. She does not call anyone. She walks back up the rocky slope to the road. She gets in the car. She drives home to Kalispell. At trial, she would say, "I wasn't thinking about where we were. I just pushed." She would say it was a moment of anger, a moment of panic, a split-second response to being grabbed that she did not control. The prosecution would point to several facts that complicated this account. She had the car keys, both sets. Cody's keys did not go over the cliff with him. They were in Jordan's possession when she drove back to Kalispell. This meant that at some point, before or during the walk down to the ledge, Jordan was in possession of the only means by which Cody could have driven himself home. She drove away from the scene without checking whether her husband of 8 days was still alive at the bottom of the ravine she had just watched him fall into. Assistant United States Attorney Chris McLean would note at sentencing that there were no drugs or alcohol involved in this case. Jordan Graham was thinking clearly that evening. She was, in his words, "You were thinking very clearly." Cody Johnson's body comes to rest on the rocks at the bottom of the ravine below the loop trail. It will be there for 4 days before it is found. Jordan Graham arrives home in Kalispell. She sends text messages to friends during the drive back. She tells nobody what happened. Somewhere on the Going to the Sun road, the kayak trip Cody had skipped that morning is already over. His friends had come back. The mountains were still there. Everything was exactly as it had been, except that it wasn't. Jordan Graham did not call for help. Instead, when Cody Johnson's co-worker called to report him missing on the morning of July 8th, Cody had not shown up for work at Nomad Global Communications in Columbia Falls. Jordan Graham had a story ready. She told investigators that the last time she saw Cody, he was getting into a dark-colored car in their driveway. He had received a text from a friend visiting from out of town. He had gone for a drive. She had not heard from him since. It was a specific story. It named a specific explanation. It redirected investigators away from the park, away from Jordan herself, and toward a set of unnamed friends from out of state who had, according to Jordan, whisked her husband away for an impromptu road trip. It was completely fabricated. On the morning of July 10th, 3 days after Cody's death, 2 days after he had been reported missing, Jordan Graham sat down at a computer at her parents' residence in Kalispell and created an email account. The account username was CarmenTony607. A few minutes after creating the account, Jordan used it to email herself. The email was written as if from a man named Tony. It said that Cody had come to the area with some friends, that Tony had seen the Twitter post about Cody's disappearance, and that there was no need to keep looking. It suggested Cody had been with friends, and that there had been an accident. In other words, Jordan Graham constructed a fictional correspondent, gave him a name, gave him a plausible backstory, and then sent herself an email from him, which she could then present to investigators as independent evidence that Cody was alive and with friends. The construction of this email was documented. The creation timestamp of the account existed. The IP address existed. Every step Jordan took to build this fabrication left a trace. She did not know that at the time. On July 11th, Jordan Graham approached a park ranger and said she had information about where Cody's body might be found. She offered to take a search party to a location in Glacier National Park. She led them to the loop. She stood at the edge of the cliff and discovered her husband's body in the ravine below. When the ranger commented that it was unusual that Jordan herself had led the party to the precise location, Jordan explained it simply. "It was a place he wanted to see before he died," she said. "He would come up here with friends to drive fast when his friends were visiting from out of state." Cody's body was recovered by helicopter from the ravine on July 12th. Jordan Graham had, in the space of 4 days, created a false cover story, fabricated an email from a fictional person, led investigators to the body as though by coincidence, and offered a tidy explanation for how she happened to know where to look. It was, investigators would later note, a remarkably organized sequence of deception for someone who claimed to have acted on pure impulse. What Jordan Graham did not know, what she would not learn until investigators called her in for a second interview, was that Glacier National Park had security cameras, and that those cameras had seen her. The formal investigation into Cody Johnson's death began with a phone call from his co-worker on July 8th. Cody had not come in. He had not called. That was not like him. His co-worker's concern was immediate enough to prompt the call. When investigators first interviewed Jordan Graham on July 9th, they listened to her account of the dark-colored car, "You the out-of-town friends," the last text message. They noted it. They began making inquiries. They found no evidence of out-of-town friends. They found no vehicle matching Jordan's description. They found no one who had seen Cody Johnson after the evening of July 7th. When Jordan led the search party to the loop on July 11th and Cody's body was recovered the following day, the investigation shifted. Park rangers had already flagged something. It was, as one ranger noted to Jordan directly, unusual that she had been the one to find the body. Unusual that she had known precisely where to look. Unusual that a grieving spouse had navigated directly to a specific, remote, treacherous location in a large national park without hesitation. Jordan's explanation that it was a place he wanted to see before he died did not land the way she intended. It raised more questions than it answered. Cameron Fredrickson, meanwhile, had not been waiting for official answers. He told ABC News later that from the moment he heard Cody was missing, he had suspected Jordan. He broke into their house. He looked for evidence. He found nothing incriminating, but his certainty was unshaken. "I almost instantly thought Jordan knew something, did something, or was a part of what happened to Cody," he said. "When Cody told me he was going to propose to Jordan, I wasn't real supportive of it." He told investigators what he knew. He told them about the relationship, about how one-sided it had always seemed. FBI Special Agent Stephen Liss was assigned to the case. As the investigation gathered, it became increasingly clear that Jordan Graham's account was not holding together. The out-of-town friends could not be located. The dark car had no witnesses. The email from Tony was examined, and it took investigators no time at all to trace the email account back to its origin. The account Carmen Tony 607 had been created on the morning of July 10th from a computer at the residence of Jordan Graham's parents. On July 16th, Agent Liss called Jordan Graham in for a second interview. He was not asking the same questions as before. He had something new. Investigators had obtained security camera footage from the entrance to Glacier National Park. The footage was time-stamped. It was clear. It showed Jordan Graham and Cody Johnson entering the park together on the evening of July 7th. Together, both of them, at the same time. Jordan Graham had told police she last saw her husband getting into a dark car in their driveway. The camera said otherwise. On July 16th, Agent Liss sat across from Jordan Graham with that footage and asked her again what had happened on the evening of July 7th. Jordan's story was about to change. For the last time, Agent Liss had the partial evidence. He had the inconsistencies. He had a fabricated email, a cover story that had no supporting witnesses, a woman who had led a search party to her husband's body with suspicious precision. But the case turned on the security camera footage. When Liss placed that footage in front of Jordan Graham on July 16th and asked her to explain it, to explain how she could have seen Cody getting into a dark car at their home when the camera showed her entering the park with him that same evening, her first story collapsed. A new account emerged. Yes, she had been with Cody at Glacier. They had gone for a walk. They had argued. He had grabbed her arm. She had pushed him and he had fallen. It was an accident. She had panicked. She had been afraid no one would believe her. That was why she had lied. Agent Liss listened. He noted the new account. He noted what it confirmed and what it still left unexplained. He noted that Jordan Graham had driven home with the only set of keys to the car her husband had been in, that she had sent text messages on the drive back, that she had not. At any point on the night of July 7th, called emergency services, a hospital, a family member, or a friend to say that her husband had fallen from a cliff and she did not know if he was alive. He noted the text message sent that morning, the one Jordan had sent to her friend. You may remember it. She had written it hours before she and Cody drove to the park. But dead serious. If you don't hear from me at all again tonight, something happened. At the time the friend received it, she had not known what to do with it. Now, with everything investigators had assembled, the message read differently. It read like someone who had already made a decision. Not someone who was afraid of Cody's reaction to a difficult conversation. Someone who already knew the evening was going to end in a way that could not be taken back. Jordan Graham's version of events required the push to have been an accident of rage, an impulse, an uncontrolled moment in an argument on a cliff she had not chosen for its proximity to a 300-foot drop. The car keys, the text message, the fabricated email, the cover story, the search party, each of these individually could perhaps be explained. Together, they formed a pattern. On September 9th, 2013, Jordan Linn Graham was arrested. She was charged with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and making false statements. The charge that carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison. When Jordan Graham was charged, she was released from custody pending trial. U.S. Magistrate Judge Jeremiah Lynch ruled that the government had not demonstrated she was a flight risk or a danger to the community, and she was placed under home detention and ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation. A grand jury had indicted her on October 3, 2013, on the full set of charges. Trial was set for December in Missoula Federal Court. By the time the case reached the courtroom on December 9th, the prosecution had assembled what they considered a thorough picture of what had happened. In court, prosecutors laid out the progression of Jordan's accounts. Version 1. Cody had left with out-of-town friends in a dark car. She had seen him go. She had not been there. Version 2, after the security camera footage. Yes, they had been at the park together. It was an argument. He grabbed her arm. She pushed him. An accident. Version 3 in her guilty plea. She pushed him with both hands in the back. He fell face first. With each revision, the story moved closer to the cliff's edge. Prosecutors presented the text messages, dozens of them, exchanged between Jordan and Kimberly Martinez, documenting the progression from wedding day excitement to post-wedding despair. They presented the ominous message sent on the morning of the 7th. They presented the fabricated email and the timeline of its creation. They presented the security camera footage. They presented testimony from Cody's friends and family about the one-sided nature of the relationship. Brad Blasdell testified that Cody had been infatuated with Jordan and that it had seemed one-sided. Cameron Fredrickson testified that he had never thought the marriage would work, that he had suspected Jordan from the moment Cody went missing, and that he had broken into their house looking for evidence. Stephen Rutledge testified about the kayaking trip, about Cody declining because Jordan had a surprise for him. Johnson's mother, Sherry, took the stand. She told the court she had always wanted to be a grandma. She said her son had been excited about that, too. The defense tried to chip away at the prosecution's characterization of Jordan as a cold and calculating figure. They argued that she was immature, socially underdeveloped, incapable of the kind of deliberate planning the prosecution was attributing to her. They argued that the push had been a moment of rage and panic, not a planned act. They noted that she had no prior criminal history, no documented violent tendencies, no history of the kind of calculated behavior being attributed to her. On December 12th, 4 days into the trial, before the case was submitted to the jury, Jordan Graham pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. It appeared, in that moment, to be a resolution. It was not. On March 25, 2014, 2 days before her scheduled sentencing, Jordan Graham filed a motion to withdraw her guilty plea. She argued that prosecutors had negotiated the plea deal in bad faith, that they had agreed to drop the first-degree murder charge, but then pushed the judge toward a harsher sentence despite that agreement. She asked to have the plea set aside and the case reopened. Prosecutors denied bad faith. They argued Jordan was attempting to delay sentencing. Judge Donald Molloy agreed with the prosecution. He denied the motion. Sentencing was set for March 27, 2014. Missoula Federal Court, March 27, 2014. The courtroom was full. Cody Johnson's mother, Sherry, was there. His friends were there. One of Johnson's relatives would later describe the moment the plea was confirmed, whispering, "She said guilty." His friends held hands. Before Judge Donald Molloy delivered the sentence, the court heard from both sides. The prosecution's central argument was this: Jordan Graham had not acted on impulse. She had acted on calculation. The text message sent the morning of the 7th, "If you don't hear from me tonight, something happened," was a pre-crime disclosure. The choice of location was deliberate. A remote, treacherous cliff that she had navigated to directly and without hesitation. The retention of both sets of car keys in her pocket, not lost over the cliff with Cody, was evidence of planning. The fabricated email, the cover story, the search party, and the staged discovery all pointed to a person who had thought, at some level, about what happened after. Assistant U.S. Attorney Chris McLean noted the absence of drugs and alcohol. This was not a crime committed in an altered state. Jordan Graham had been, in his words, thinking very clearly. He argued that the circumstances of the case closely resembled conduct typically associated with first-degree murder, not the heat-of-the-moment push Jordan had described. The defense's position rested on Jordan's account of the push itself, a split-second reaction to being grabbed in the middle of an argument with no intention to kill. Jordan's own words to the judge before sentencing were, "It was a moment of complete shock and panic. I have no other explanation." The defense argued that her subsequent lies to police were the product of a young woman who was terrified, not calculating, who had panicked and made things worse with each decision rather than executing a coherent plan. They asked the judge to consider her youth, her lack of criminal history, her documented social immaturity, and the chaos rather than the coherence of the cover-up. The prosecution sought a sentence of 50 years to life. The defense sought a substantially lesser term. Jordan took the stand at sentencing. She cried throughout. She apologized to her own family and to Johnson's. She said she still loved Cody. She said she had not been thinking about where they were standing when she pushed. Judge Molloy listened, and then he spoke. He said he had been waiting, throughout the proceedings, for Jordan Graham to say something specific. He had been waiting for her to say she was sorry for killing Cody. It had not come. What had come instead were words about shock, panic, and the absence of any other explanation. The judge noted the distinction. "There's only one person in this room that knows what happened," Molloy said, "and I don't think she's been entirely truthful about what happened." He sentenced Jordan Linn Graham to 365 months in federal prison, 30 years, 5 months, with no possibility of parole, followed by 5 years of supervised release. She was ordered to pay $16,910 in restitution, the cost of recovering Cody Johnson's body from the ravine below the Loop Trail. She was prohibited, though for the duration of her incarceration, from directly or indirectly profiting from providing information about the murder. The first-degree murder charge was dropped as part of the plea agreement. The false statements charge was dropped. Jordan Graham left the courthouse in Missoula and began a federal prison sentence that will not be completed until 2044. Cody Johnson's friends filed out into the cold. There is no institution in this case that failed Cody Johnson. No agency held a risk file and chose not to act. No protocol was skipped. No warning was missed. What this case raises instead is a question about the criminal justice system's capacity to reach a verdict on the most fundamental fact: what Jordan Graham actually intended when she drove her husband to the Loop. The federal plea system meant that the jury, which had heard 4 days of testimony and was within reach of a verdict, never deliberated on the evidence. Jordan Graham's guilty plea to second-degree murder closed the legal question before it could be fully examined. Second-degree murder, under federal law, requires that the killing be intentional, but does not require premeditation. It is the charge that covers a killing done with the intent to kill, but in the heat of the moment. Not planned, but not accidental. The prosecution had argued, consistently and with documented evidence, that this case had the hallmarks of first-degree murder, that the text message, the location, the car keys, the cover-up, pointed to something that had been thought through. The plea meant those arguments never received a definitive judicial answer. What the judge said at sentencing reflected this ambiguity. He did not say Jordan Graham had planned the murder. He said he did not think she had been entirely truthful about what happened. There is a meaningful difference between those two statements, and Judge Molloy was precise enough to make it. The truth of what Jordan Graham decided in the minutes and hours before she drove her husband to Glacier National Park is known with certainty by one person. She is serving 30 years in a federal facility. She will be eligible for supervised release in 2044. Cody Lee Johnson had wanted to be a husband, a father, the kind of man whose mountain road trips his friends talked about for decades, the man his mother had already imagined as a father, already mapped onto the word grandchildren, already given a future in her mind before a court had to take it back. There is no law named for Cody, no scholarship, no foundation. The case did not produce the kind of institutional change that sometimes follows cases like this, because there was no institution to change. There was only a man who trusted the person he had chosen, and a cliff and 300 feet of air. Jordan Graham will serve her sentence until at least 2044. There is no parole in the federal system. The judge who sentenced her said plainly that he did not believe she had been truthful. He sat in the same room as the one person who knows what happened on the evening of July 7th and concluded, on the record, that the truth had still not fully arrived. Perhaps it never will. What remains is what Sherry Johnson said in court. She had always wanted to be a grandma. Her son had been excited about that too. Cody had a kayak trip to get to on the morning of July 7th. His friends asked him to come. He said he couldn't make it. His wife had a surprise for him. His friends paddled out. They came back. Cody Johnson would have been 56 years old in 2044. When Jordan Graham walks out of prison, he will still be 25. He deserved the kayak trip. He deserved the mountain roads and the grandchildren and the decades. He deserved to have his trust met with honesty, not with a cliff. Remember Cody Johnson, not for how he died, but for who he was when the world was still his. If Cody's story moved you, if you believe these cases deserve to be told and remembered, subscribe to When They Killed and turn on notifications. Every subscriber is a reason to keep building this, and share this video, not for the views, for Cody. Because the best thing we can do for someone who was silenced is to make sure the world keeps hearing their name.